But then, like there's so many topics you could pick. So with you, I would like to talk about breathwork.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like I don't want it to be like rigid. Like with like I also don't prepare.
Yeah.
Because I just want to listen to you, and whenever I have a follow-up question or I don't understand anything, then I just ask you. It's just like a normal conversation.
Yeah. Okay. And then when I'm done, and you'll find something to ask.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're, what is breathwork?
What is breathwork?
What is breathwork?
That is a big question. What is breathwork?
Like, try to describe it maybe in a few sentences.
Well, what I do is called Breathwork and Shamanic Journeying, which is a combination of and a culmination of 30 years of my healing work. And so the shamanic journeying is about 3 or 4 healing modalities that I've kind of boiled into, and using a guided visualization allows the person to unlock concepts and beliefs. The healing work is based in quantum reality, and it works through the time and space are not linear. So we can work where stories are bought into and beliefs are birthed within the person's consciousness. And from that point, we can work with them. So that way we can actually ripple through time and really release the stories and concepts. And it makes it very subtle and easeful, because it's not a shifting of like in one moment it's there, one moment it's not. You're working through the timeline. So like, say you bought into something as a child. And so from that point on, you're believing that, and you're choosing from that belief. And each belief has its effect on every choice we make. And so what happens is that you roll back to the time that you bought into that belief structure, and you resolve that story, that victim energy, whatever you want to call it, and still work through the karmic experience. But then what happens is, that point, you've changed your perception. And so from that point on, you're choosing differently. And so you come to this moment, and all of a sudden, like maybe in the beginning of the interview, you were sitting over here and I was sitting over there, or wherever, or we're switched places. And because of the way things work, now we're sitting someplace else. And you feel something maybe slightly shifted, but you can't put your finger on it. But then your life is completely changes, and you start to choose differently, and things open up in your life. And it's almost like a miracle, if you would.
So would you say, or could I say that it is something like, because you said you go back into like childhood, is it like some sort of like a reset?
It's kind of like a reset. It's allowing you to go back in moments in time, and even bringing your future self into that moment as well. So it's like, it's a really combination of all kinds of things. But it can be a reset, or it's a delete. Because if you go through that experience without buying into the victim energy or the less than light or love energy, then you're choosing completely different. So you're actually deleting that experience, allowing you to still roll through the karmic experience, but not buying into the energies that would cause disharmony in your life.
All right.
And it could be past lives too. It doesn't have to be in this life. It could be, if you believe in past lives, it could be, 3 lives ago, technically.
Okay, so like, how does it work, like specifically? Like what you're doing is you're doing like both of it. You first do like a shamanic journeying.
The shamanic journey, sets you up. And how I see the shamanic journeying, we talked a little bit about that. The shamanic journey is also in connection to the breathwork. It's a really way to drop in and be present and safe in your body. It's one of those things that really allows you to get into the moment, allows you to gather your energies and really be there, and then drop even deeper into your body and feel what it is to be you, and find a secure, safe, loving space that you are. And then when we move into the breath work, it allows the breath to dive even deeper, because you're already set up in a place of centeredness and calmness and basically inner love.
Okay, so so could you explain maybe like how it takes place, the shamanic journey? Because obviously I know how it looks like, but yeah, maybe to one who have never done it, like.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a guided meditation, guided visualization. It's not so much that you see or don't see anything. It's really about being in the moment and listening to the voice and following along. And through that process of the experience of me sharing the journey, whatever it might be, it's very organic. It depends on the room and the individual people that we're working with. The stories vary from place to place, and whatever we're doing, It's kind of an instantaneous download that I get of like, oh, we're going to work on this and this is where we're going to go. And it could be walking through a meadow in a forest. It could be going into a healing chamber. It could be using sacred geometries. It could be many different ways of working with it. But the theme is that you're following along with your mind and being present in your body. And so eventually the mind disconnects and you're just listening and following along within your body. And I won't get too much into it, but it works in quantum reality, and there's energetic and vibrational keys that help unlock these beliefs and concepts that are associated with the story.
Okay, and like the participants don't necessarily like notice like a huge change within their body because they do it lying down.
They do it
right?
lying down,
And
yes,
so you
and
said
with your
it's
eyes
like a
closed.
guided meditation, and there's some music involved.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you use some how are they called with the not candles, you know, like the sticks that you light and then they
Yeah. So.
how are they
Yeah.
called?
So. Yeah. So
Oh,
the
maybe
journey.
I'm mixing
Yeah.
things up.
No, it's okay. You kind of are, but it's okay. So yeah, you start off lying down, and it is basically I take you through with your eyes closed, lying down. You go through the visualization. There might be some music, there may not be music played. And it's really just tuning into the voice and following along. And then if I do play music, it helps set the mood and maybe bring up some emotions and feelings with that. And so that is the journey. So, and it's very organic in that way.
Okay. And that prepares you for the breath work that follows afterwards.
Yeah, and then the breath work, we usually have a transitional period because people are usually very deep in the state that is created in the journey. And so then usually you'll sit up and we then go into the detail about the breath work. So it gives you an opportunity to assimilate what just took place and also to hear what the potentials that could happen during breath work. Because breath work it can be a very intense process. It's not really for the faint of heart because it can bring up a lot of deep shadow work, emotional.
Yeah, but why does it? Like in the end, I mean, you could say in the end it's just breathing.
We can get to that in a
second.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, and then we transition into the breath. And so I talk about the different experiences that people can have, you know, kind of help them understand that they're experiences that they're going to be potentially feeling. Because it may not happen to everyone, it may happen to some people and not others. It just depends on where you're at because you're never the same person. So you might do a breath work this time and you might feel very ecstatic, and the next time you do it, you might be feeling a lot of sadness or anger or whatever. And so I want to prepare people because when we work and drop into the shadow, it can be really very confrontational and very fearful. There's a lot of scare. It can be very scary for people to be into that energy. The love and light we all receive open-heartedly and jump into it freely. But the shadow stuff we usually push away. So this really helps you embrace that shadow side of you. And what it does is by focusing on the breath, and we're breathing through the mouth, which accesses the fight or flight nervous system, where most of our traumas and stories are stored. So the places that we are storing them is in that level of consciousness. Like when we're driving in a boot and we almost get in a scooter accident, we kind of hold our breath, we tighten up, and that energetic experience is stored into our nervous system and our cellular memory. And so by breathing in that repetition, the 2 parts in, lower belly, upper chest, and full exhalation, all through the mouth, it accesses that fight or flight nervous system. And it also helps with the nervous system itself and the cellular memory. And so as you start to breathe, and there's waves of breathing, and you get through a certain part, like we talk about in the beginning of the class, you're working through the masculine part of the brain in the beginning, and there's a lot of resistance, just like sitting and meditating. You're working through that frontal lobe where the ego likes to stay in control. And so what happens is that you have to take a little bit of more effort to breathe in the beginning, to kind of force the breath actually almost. And then after a period of time, the breath actually starts to breathe you. And so what you're moving through is that you're allowing the ego to kind of quiet itself and drop down, and you're moving deeper into the consciousness, the unconscious, depending on where you go. And as you're breathing, then because you're breathing in the mouth breathing and the repetition that you're doing, it accesses that nervous system, and it starts to allow that nervous system to unwind. And as the mind, which is kind of the gatekeeper, and the ego is the kind of the gatekeeper, once that kind of gets shut down, all this stuff can start to arise. It's been in your body, the stuff that you've stored in there, and allows you to kind of empty out your backpack that you've been carrying all these rocks and heaviness, you know, of emotions and feelings, to really let those things go. And so as you let them go, almost like a burp, you let go of that air and you feel much better. And it gives you more spaciousness within you. But it has to be that little uncomfortability that comes up sometimes. And then the tears, you might have eyes leaking, you might be crying, you might be sobbing, it might be very cathartic. You might laugh. You can do all kinds of things with the releasing of the energies. That's why I have people laugh in the sessions, because it really allows you to, in a way, trick the nervous system to let go of a huge storage of energy, but in a positive way, even though the stories would be negative. So it allows you to really release them in a light way of doing it. That's the way it is. And that's how it works. That's really, you're quieting the mind, which is kind of the gatekeeper of the nervous system and the stories that we have, and allows it to just slowly rise up or release in certain ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the way you describe it now, it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge, right?
It
For
is.
most of the people.
It can be, well, you're confronting yourself, which is, it can be very terrifying. You can stop for a second.
Yeah, it's always terrifying to like confront like the inner demons or like oneself.
Yeah. And most of the reasons why the things we store is because we're afraid of it. There's some stories that we have that make it bigger or more scarier, but those are all in the past. The experience is completely gone. And so we just have these memories of it. And we store those memories within us, because if we let go of them, something bigger and greater might happen, which it won't. But there's a fear of that. The unknown is more scarier than the known. So we rather hold on to something that might be uncomfortable or even painful. But we rather hold on to it because we've already experienced it. We know what that is, and I won't say, what's the word I'm looking for? We haven't, yeah, so basically you've conquered it. That's the word I'm looking for. You've conquered it already because you've already experienced it. So even though it's painful and uncomfortable in your body, as it still lives, but you rather conquer that and hold on to that, something that's true, than step into something that's unknown. Even though the unknown, at least from my perspective now, the unknown is more love and light than the old stories, because we're moving through all that karmic stuff and we've got most of that out of the way. And so most of the stuff coming in is now more joyful and happier. But our minds is so tricky, and the ego is so controlling and such a magnificent magician in keeping us where we're at and staying in control, is that we would rather hold on to the pain than jump into something unknown that might be even more pleasant and more joyful.
But why would you say is that? Why do we human beings like evolved as like some beings with such a strong mind who actually want to hold on to the bad and to
like I said, it's comfortable, it's known.
Well, apparently it's not comfortable, because then not so many people do it, right?
It's more comfortable than the unknown. Let's say that. The unknown is very, especially for somebody that especially uses the mind, because they always want to figure it out. And for us to be truly free, you can't use the mind. The mind has to be a servant of the heart. The mind can never figure out anything, because the reason why is that the mind is such a limited bandwidth. Consciousness has a huge bandwidth, so you're only getting a small sliver of the information. So it's like the old story of, like, you've got 3 sages all blindfold, and they're led to an elephant. One grabs the tail, one grabs the trunk, and one grabs the leg. And they can't tell you what it is because they can't have the totality of what it is, but they give you what their perception of it is, which is completely wrong. And so that's why what you're asking is, that's why. The mind is just, it's so limited, and so it can't figure it out. So you have to let go of the mind. the heart's, it's almost like this, and I could get this wrong, serial and parallel communications. You know, it's it's a technical term. Like the heart's more serial. You can only have a certain bandwidth coming in, and it can only process. But parallel, you have a lot bigger bandwidth, and it gets that information. And I'm not sure which one would be referenced for, but whatever is able to process more information. Or you can look at it this way, like copper wire, you know, like telephone wire. You can transfer a certain amount of bandwidth there, but if you have coax cable, like for cable, you can get a much bigger bandwidth. And so that's the heart's more of the bigger bandwidth, and the mind's a smaller bandwidth. And the mind believes the egoic part of the mind, which is the one that thinks it's in control. I am. You know?
So would you agree, if I understood you correctly, that it's good to have the mind as like how to say, not as a master but as a servant?
Yes.
Like,
yeah, that's exactly
okay.
what it is. Yeah, the
Okay.
mind is more for supporting the spirit.
Yeah.
But
so you're not anti-mind.
no, the mind is very powerful. You know, and just like the heart is designed to pump blood, the mind is designed to think, and it's supposed to think. But how we think and what we think about, that's where we have control, and that's where most of us go astray, is because the mind is really, it is designed to support what's happening around us, not trying to project into the future or worry about the past. But it's supposed to be in this present moment, focusing on how to serve in that way, or focusing on the greater self. But when we start to get into fear because maybe our needs weren't met as a child, we start to worry about our future. And then we start spinning and we get anxiety. Or something happens that we don't get resolved in the past, and so it sticks in the past, and we're worried about that because it's, again, trying to serve, but it's not. It wants to be in control because it doesn't want to have that pain, and, you know, trying to get rid of the pain on our side.
And do you think that there is like a stronger tendency in the Western world for people to use the mind as a master and not as a servant? Or is it also like evolving in like Southeast Asia or in Asia for that matter?
I think there's a huge insurge of Eastern philosophies around the world.
Yes.
And spirituality is awakening. And so I think that it is starting to shift in all corners of the world. That they're waking up that the heart is the leader and the brain is, or the mind is the follower, if you will. So I think there is a huge shift that's taking place. And I think the quicker we're able to step into that and learn how to do that, the more happier we're going to be. Because if you look at all the people that have achieved that, they're usually very happy, very blissful. They're very in a state of, you know, ecstasy a lot of times, or joy. And so I think that is the key for happiness, you know, ultimately.
Yeah, what I always wonder is, why do people lose the ability, or cannot see that, you know, that actually they should be guided by their hearts and not by their minds? Because like, you don't, like, this is just something that I ask myself all the time. Why did we like evolve like this? Like, isn't there also like a meaning behind it? Because when I see, you know, everything happens for a reason. You know, every event happens for a reason. You know, it has a meaning. Then I think, you know, maybe this also has a meaning. You know, that people lost their way. You know, lost their connection to their hearts. And yeah, I just can't. It's hard for me to find an explanation for that, why that is, because obviously you see many people are unhappy.
If you listen to yourself, you're trying to find an explanation. So you're looking in the past, present, or future, you know, so you're already outside and you're doing the opposite, you know, of what you're wanting to be happy with, right? Is just to be in the present moment and just listen to the heart and allow the mind to find. Your mind is already trying to figure out results. And so, you know, that's the whole point, is you can't try to figure it out. You have to just be. That's the kind of the trick, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The trick, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's
the
like,
trick.
Yeah, it's the trick the ego pulls out, you know, or however you want to talk about it. But it's like you're already trying to figure out an answer.
Yes.
You know, and so you're using the mind to do that, which again, the mind can't find the answer. But if you allow yourself to be present, allow the heart to rise up, then you experience that. But if you try to think your way through it, you won't be able to do it. You have to trust. And what happens, at least how I see it, is that, it's generations. The sins of the father, or karmic, that those teachings, is that we get passed down. Our parents only were taught, they only know what they were taught. We only know what we were taught. And through life, we start to learn things. But, generations back, nobody was really looking for consciousness. Nobody was really doing a lot of spiritual work. A lot of religious, but that still kind of kept you in boxes. But now more of the spirituality is waking up, and people are starting to do the work. And so they're deprogramming themselves out of fear-based things. Like as a child, if you're not fed right away, because the parents didn't understand, or they were busy working in the fields or doing whatever, working long hours to try to support the family. They're doing the best we can in society, because society is how it is. But the child learns that they're not going to be fed. So when they grow up, they start to be fearful that they can't support themselves, or especially if they're gone hungry for periods of time. Even if they're a little hungry, it affects each person. And so as you grow up, you have that belief that you're not supporting yourself because you weren't fed as a child right away. And so that blooms into something else because something else teaches you that, or whatever. Because you have that expectation, you create that reality. So it's kind of a domino effect until you break that cycle. And so that's what we're learning to do, is to break those cycles, to be in the moment and trust, and be in, following the heart. And the other thing is too, is that we might step into like a relationship. It's a great way of looking at this, is that we step into a relationship in this moment. And then what happens is 2 minutes later, whatever you stepped into that relationship for, you got out of. So you're done with the relationship, but our minds and our concepts believe that a relationship should last longer than a moment. And so
what you're talking about, any kind of relationship?
What, love relationship, intimate relationship, any relationship.
Yeah,
really.
okay.
Yeah.
Friendship.
Friendship, yeah.
Okay.
And it could be romantic. It doesn't really matter. So you step into a relationship to learn something from this person. And so you get that right away. Say in 2 seconds, you're done with that. You've learned, you got the download, you got the whatever, you understood, you have the experience. But then our mind thinks, oh, this was a relationship. I had a green light 2 seconds ago. I need to keep this going. I need to find out what it is. So the heart says, no, I'm done with this relationship. But the mind overrides that and goes, oh, I need to be in this relationship longer. So then it tries to make it work. Then you're actually butting heads and fighting, and whatever you were there to learn is already gone. Been there, done that. And so you're creating all kinds of havoc, and so you're creating all these other experiences like, oh, I can't trust my heart because it's not working now. The mind gets involved. And so then you're going into this headstrong relationship trying to make it work. And then you're telling everything that the heart's been lying to you because it's not, and then finally you do separate, and then it says, look, the heart was wrong. I wasn't supposed to be in this relationship. And so that's where you get a lot of that experiences and those disconnects and those beliefs that faults, exponentially grows into these things that we have to unwind.
Like, is there also must be a connection to a gut feeling and intuition? Like you're talking about relationships, romantic relationships are usually kind of a big thing for human beings. But sometimes you also have intuitions or gut feelings about
and that's part of the heart. Listening to the heart is it's another way of saying a gut feeling is listening to the heart, or intuition is listening to the heart. It's that bigger communication. It's not coming from the thing between our ears, that thinker.
Right.
Yeah. So like we touch base is like in the beginning, you're working through the masculine part of the brain.
Through the what? Sorry.
Masculine part of the brain, or the egoic part of the brain, the frontal lobe. And then eventually, after about 7 to 10 minutes, you do drop into beyond that. And so you're actually processing more into the heart and less out of the mind. And the breath becomes much more easier to breathe. And when that state, you're allowing yourself to drop into and kind of really survey that level of consciousness to see what traumas and stories are stored there. And by breathing in that, it also keeps the mind focused where it shuts down, and so it allows the feelings to arise. And, what happens is as you're breathing, how I look at it is because my mind's still now, because I'm focused on the breath, my consciousness drifts into rooms that I've had the doors closed and locked. And I tend to walk into those rooms and open those doors and see the stories that I've got stored in my mind, or a feeling or an emotion that's there. And then I experience that and I release it. So then by opening those doors and in this conscious way, as we're breathing, it shines the light in there and kind of flushes out the darkness in the room and allows those feelings and emotions that have been hiding from to be free and released. And they come out in tears, they come out in maybe sounds, um, or even just a thought or like sensation in the body. And then it opens us up to more and more light. And so as we move through that process, and we do this over and over again, or just in one session, it starts to really clear out those empty rooms of emotions and feelings and stories that we have, and clears them out so that way we're more full of love and light. And so after you're breathing for a period of time, what happens is then you release the breath and you sit. And through the sitting and receiving, kind of like a shavasana at the end of yoga, all that effort and work that you've put into the breathing process, this backfill of grace comes in, this backfill of love that flows in, and it fills our being up. And we get to experience the states that we created within ourselves through that practice of breathing. And it teaches us that we can expand into that bigger picture of ourselves, because the mind's so still and our hearts are so open that we are retraining our nervous system to be working in that way. And so that's what the end of the process is. It's a very beautiful process, but it does take a lot of effort to get to that. It can take, or, it may not be that effort for some people. It might be for others. I got people that breathe with me and they're just happy the entire breathwork session, because that's where they're at with themselves. And I've got people that are crying, or angry or jealous or whatever. And it's a range of emotions that show up. But at the end, in that shavasana kind of state where you're sitting and taking that receptive posture, that's when really the mind quiets, the doors really open, and then grace just flows in.
And you're doing this for quite a while now, right?
I've been facilitating breathwork for about almost 15 years now, and I've been doing the shamanic journeying or energetic work, because it's evolved into different things. But I've been doing that for about 30 years now.
And would you say that that it has that most people respond to it? Because this is what I found, that even what I think, I don't know, like you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like I think even if you have like very little experience with meditation, or when you are like somewhat critical towards it, like if you just like focus on the breath and really try to like relinquish, that it has an impact.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's this beauty of this work, and it's like kind of a 1-2 kind of punch almost, where the shamanic journeying is very subtle. And so if you're not really that subtle of a person, you're more of a grosser or denser kind of energy, you might not experience much in that. So it wouldn't really trigger you. But and it can be confronting, because there's so many things about meditation and visualizations that have been put out there, and people have experienced different things through that. And so there might be even judgment on it. But the breathwork is what's beautiful about it is two major things. Is that it's breathing. We've been doing that since we were born, and so we're all can relate to breathing, and we all experience it. Yeah, it's familiar, and so we can breathe, and it's non-confrontational because we breathe 24/7. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it's such a physical, tangible experience that you get, because you're working with the breath and the body. And so it's really those kinesthetic kind of people that learn from doing or feeling. It allows you to really feel that experience, and it's also a mental part of it, and it's just all kinds of things. You get a total sensory experience with the breath work. It's a really powerful way of experiencing it. And so because you're not confronted by the breath, oh, I can do this, I lean into it. And just with that openness is 50% of it, just being open to, experience it. And then even the people that aren't open and they do it, they still experience the sensations. It's over and over again. The people that actually, it's funny, the people, when I explain what's going to happen and the potentials that you could experience, the ones that are more resistant to it usually have a bigger awakening to it, because I have no idea why, but it is that way. Because I think one of the reasons is that their mind's more in control.
yes.
And so when the mind, and this work really does quiet the mind and focuses it. And so when that happens, it's like they're jumping through these like doors that they never experienced before.
Yeah, to me, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like to those people who are more resistant towards it, I think they are always in their entire life more resistant towards their own feelings, and maybe suppressing more feelings and lying to themselves about their true feelings. So like to me, it makes sense that they have like more intense experiences. So would you recommend breathwork to anyone?
Yeah, I think anyone can, any age, if they can sit for a while. I mean, children might be, you do it shorter periods of time, you can actually work with children this way. I know that it's a big practice, at least I'm from California, and there's a big push in the recovering programs that are using breath work. People that are very emotional can actually use breath work. People that are very mental can do breath work. And you can even do it pregnant too. I've been, the way I've been trained is that even if you're even 9 months pregnant, the mother can roll over on her side and breathe. It may not be breathing as hard or as intensely, but you can still get benefit from that. So anybody can benefit from doing the breath work. And there's different types of breath work out there too. That's the other thing. You got to really be mindful. And there's a lot of facilitators that, got excited and had a great experience and they wanted to learn it 2 days later. And so they're learning it and they're trying to teach it. You
Yeah,
definitely want to make sure you find somebody that's got some background in them, some that they've done their work first. It's like you need to really have your own practice and have done a lot of inner perspective, really looking inwardly and really fleshing out your own self before you jump into facilitating. So if you come across somebody, check them out. Make sure that there's somebody that you can work with, because there are, like I said, a lot of people have learned how to do breath work, and it's, anybody can breathe. Anybody can say breathe, but it's holding the space and holding and being present with people is the most powerful thing in breathwork. Is that the facilitator really needs to be able to be present with all the feelings and emotions that show up. And if they're not capable of doing it because they haven't done their own homework, then it can be it could be damaging to people. So it's not a work that you really need to worry about, but you want to make sure that you are working with people that are qualified.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah, I don't know if you mentioned it, like you are also guiding the sessions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
through the breathing process, I am giving all kinds of support systems, energetically, verbally, physically, because I do come through with my personal work. I use light touch to help bring awareness to parts of the body, also make them feel safe in their body. And there's a lot of subtler things I could talk about, but I really don't like to get into that stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But there's a lot of support systems within the sessions I hold. Yeah, and it comes through, like I said, 30 years of healing work. So, in all kinds of forms and dynamics of working with different schools of thoughts.
Yeah, and this is also what I mentioned to you before. There are different ways of doing it. Like breath work. Also, like there are differences in breath work. Like to me, I don't breathe how you teach it. Like I like, to me it's just like I just use a different breathing technique, which I just feel more comfortable with.
And
But
now that you've gone there, the breathing is really just to engage the mind. There is so much more to the breath work.
yeah, that we also cannot cover. I know.
Yeah, we
I
can't
know,
go into that. But to be aware of that, it's like the breathing. Like I told you, I believe I had some people that filmed one of the breath sessions. I had a special session for them, and they brought a couple participants that they wanted to film. And the filming crew was around, and I brought a bunch of friends in, and we all did the breath work. And like I shared, the people that were doing the filming, the two camera people, were having emotional releases, and they weren't even breathing, because it's the field that's created in them. It's the field that the facilitator and the participants are really creating in there that actually helped with the work. So the breath is just to really engage the mind, to still it, to quiet. But it's the support of the facilitator and the energy that person brings, and the intention. Intention's everything, really.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that's a very good last word. Intention is everything.
Intention is everything. Yeah.
Good. Well, yeah. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Really kind of you.
Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.